fire alarm rang. Students filed out of their third floor classroom and made their way toward the stairs. Then the sound of gunfire rang throughout the hall. I shouted, "Turn around, go to your classrooms." Students started running toward me and I tried to steer them into an open classroom. By the time I got to my classroom door, the shooter was at the end of the hallway. I was locked out of my classroom, so I pushed 8 kids into a 2.5-foot alcove by the classroom door. I desperately tried to keep the students out of the line of fire. I saw the shooter approaching wearing a helmet and a mask. I didn't know it at the time, but the gunman was a former student of mine who had been in my freshman world geography class 5 years ago. Then I felt a bullet graze my cheek. The shooting stopped abruptly as the gunman reloaded. I took advantage of the pause to push my students toward the stairway so that they could escape. I followed closely behind. A girl was lying by the stairs. I checked for a pulse but couldn't find one. Then the shooting started again. With my students safely on their way down the stairs, I ran into the bathroom to hide. I was there for what felt like an eternity until police arrived. For those harrowing moments, my only thoughts were my wife, Andrea, who teaches at the school but was in another building across campus. When the police arrived, they escorted me out of the building. As we went through the first floor, I got a glimpse of the carnage everywhere. Then I went across the street, where at last I was able to call my family and let them know I was all right. Graciously, so was my wife. When I learned that law enforcement had identified the suspect as 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz, I realized the gunman was a former student of mine. This is the first-hand account taken by reporter Kyra Gurney regarding the shooting that occurred on February 14, 2018 at a high school in Parkland, Florida, from teacher Ernest Rospierski when he assumed it was a code red fire drill. 17. This is the number of teachers and students that were killed during that somber day on February 14, 2018. For the 17 families, Valentine's Day will never be the same. Imagine a day that is meant to be about love, romance, flowers, and candy being filled with memories of agony and depression. Elisa Alderheif, Martin Aguiano, Jamie Gutenberg, Carol Lohan, Gina Maltato, Elena Petty, Alex Shatner were all victims on that Valentine's Day massacre under the age of 14. There are no winners when it comes to gun violence, only losers. 18. 18 is the number of gun-related incidents that have taken place near a school campus or on a school campus in under 60 days in 2018. It is also the required age to buy a firearm. According to CNN, the U.S. make up less than 5% of the world's population, but holds 31% of global mass shootings. As a matter of fact, purchasing a gun is easier than purchasing a vehicle. The only requirement is to have a valid ID and a clear background. By the same token, most students graduate at the tender age of 18 years old or younger. 3%. According to a Harvard Northeastern survey, just 3% of American adults own half of the nation's firearms. Through the survey's findings, the implication is that there are more firearms in fewer hands than ever before. The survey estimates that on average, the top 3% of Americans own 17 guns apiece. To put that in a much better perspective, that's around 400 people who fall into this category, owning 1,200 guns total. That's the equivalent of a small army being strong enough to take down a small college or a large high school. These numbers are staggering and will not get better until things change. Therefore, it is my belief that strict gun control regulated by the government should take place in order to decrease the number of gun-related incidents. Emma Gonzalez, a senior who survived the mass shooting in Florida, stated that the shooter would have not been able to harm that many students with a knife. Research suggests that gun control can work. A 2016 review of 130 studies in 10 countries published in Public Affair Reviews found that new legal restrictions on owning and purchasing guns tended to be followed by a drop in gun violence, a strong indicator that restricting access to firearms can save lives. Take Australia, for example. Since 1996, lawmakers have responded with legislation that, among other propositions, banned certain types of firearms such as automatics and semi-automatic rifles and shotguns. Then established a registry of all guns owned in the country and required a permit for all new firearms purchased. Australia's firearm homicide rate dropped by 42% in the 7 years after the law was passed, and its suicide rate dropped by 57%, according to a review of evidence by Harvard researchers. Around when Australia adopted its gun regulations, the Parliament passed legislation banning private ownership of handguns in Britain and banned semi-automatic and pump-action firearms throughout the UK. It also required shotgun owners to register all of their weapons. Gunpolicy.org estimates that in 2010 there were 3.78 guns per 100 people in the UK, while in the US, meanwhile, it is estimated to have 101 guns per 100 people. Additionally, in Japan, if people want to own a gun, they must attend an all-day class, pass a written test, and achieve at least a 95% accuracy during a shooting range test. Then they have to pass a mental health evaluation at a hospital, as well as a background check in which the government digs into all criminal records or ties and interviews the friends and family members of the gun purchasing the weapon. Finally, they can only buy shotguns and air rifles, no handguns, and must retake the class and the initial exam every 3 years. By the way, Japan has had 0 mass shootings in its history of citizens owning guns. 2015 had the most firearm suicides with 22,018, homicides with 12,979, and the most firearm deaths from legal intervention of 484. 1999 had the most unintentional firearm deaths of 824 and the most firearm deaths with undetermined intent of 324. These deaths could have been completely avoided if there were more airtight laws legislated by the government. There were 313,641 firearm suicides between 1999 and 2015. Firearms were the leading cause of suicides between this era, representing 51.9% of all suicides. Suffocation was the second most frequent with 141,042 deaths. Adults 65 years and older were the most often victims of gun suicides with 72,952 deaths between 1999 and 2015. This is roughly about 23% of the total firearm suicides, with the most suicides in this group of 5,511. The total pointless deaths has a negative effect on the community that comes along with the repeating cycle. Mass shooting, thoughts and prayers, debates on gun control, and nothing gets done. We make it through the first 3 steps with ease. So why not finish something that we start and finally do something about it to end this vicious cycle? I was once told that it's better to own a gun and not need it than to need a gun and not own it. How true is that? Does that contribute to gun violence? I'm not prepared to mourn someone's death because of gun violence at my own hands. Therefore, it is time to take action. Gun control is a divisive subject. On one hand, you have people who are pro-life, pro-gun. On the other hand, you have people that are not pro-life and are not pro-gun. Then you have those people who fall in between who are not decided on both topics. However, I feel as a nation, a community, and a people, it is paramount that we come together as an entity and sign the petition on MoveOn.org. The steps are simple. The only thing that it asks for is your name, your email address, your state, and your zip code. There's also a comment box available if you have something that you would like to say in regard to this petition. And if you're not able to get to a computer, or if you don't own a computer, you can have someone do it for you. It's not asking for any valuable information. And also, The petition is asking for 721,281 signatures, and once the signatures have been reached, it is sent to the President, the House of Representatives, as well as the U.S. Senate. And this is something that I feel like will benefit our nation when it comes to gun control. Thank you.